See me, by the way. Oh.
Yeah, not too far.
Okay.
Hi.
All right, I'll try to speak that in. Hi.
Hey, everybody. Sorry for the technical delay this afternoon. Audio issues all around. Poor Christy is still sick from, the annual passing of the cold.
I was going to say the bubonic plague, I thought that was. But
and that's what you're working with kids, right? You're teaching. Yep. And they're like so little petri dishes.
Yes, I catch literally everything every second. And this one has lasted probably 3 weeks. I've just been so congested. So if you guys see me like go off camera, it's only because I'm blowing my nose or coughing and trying not to be super disgusting.
Oh my gosh, terrible. Well, anyway, hello everybody and welcome to a Democrat and Republican walk into a bar, this time virtual session. I am your Democratic host, Dr. Cindy Vanier.
And I'm Christy, your Republican host.
Yeah, so aside from being sick, how has your holiday season been going?
We had Thanksgiving. We had the last week, 2 weeks now since then. And so it's, how it is. It's a little stressful with the shopping and getting ready, and it's so fast. But yeah, and then with all of this congestion and things going on, I don't know if you've been seeing it going around too, Cindy, but I have seen so many people with stomach flu, regular flu, getting sick constantly. This has been crazy.
Yep. I got a little bout of it last week. So I'm back in the saddle. Otherwise, yeah, just doing all the things, hanging out. Today is the first day of Hanukkah. So happy Hanukkah to those who celebrate. Christmas coming up is the last week of school for kids, at least kids in our area. And then they are off school here until January 6th, which feels like forever. But it will be a great time. So we will see how things are going. It's very snowy up north from what I understand. But it's nice and mild here in Florida, and that's how we like it. So, but we're going to get hot here today. Or cold in Chrissy's case. Anyway, so
if you don't mind, because my throat is so bad too, I might just kind of let you go off, girl. I'll throw it by.
This is what I've been waiting for. No.
Start talking, I start coughing, so I'm just going to be like,
I'm just going to bulldoze right over. No. Well, let's jump into what the discussion, politics, right? Because there's been a ton of stuff going on, and it's, we are trying to keep up with this show, but between illness and things that are going on, we are just doing our best to be here, despite the fact that there is just a whirlwind of activity in Florida here, especially because we have the legislative session starting up in January. On election years, it starts a little bit earlier. So the committees have been meeting through October, November, December, and we're getting an idea of the types of bills that are going to be passed or put forth, at least in the Florida legislature. So the Republicans have a super majority, right? So they kind of get to do whatever they want. But interestingly enough, DeSantis is around, and he is very much in control of his Republican caucus, despite there's a few little push and pull between the folks that are more Trump and et cetera, and so forth. So that's the really only controversial stuff that you have coming out of the legislature, because the Democrats simply cannot do anything. They put a couple of bills out because they're in the super minority, but they really can't do a whole heck of a lot. But on the Democratic front, we've seen a couple of bills come forth to address healthcare. And interestingly enough, homegrown cannabis is one of the bills that Democrats seem to have gotten out of the committee. But among everything else that is going on in the Florida legislature, probably the biggest talk of the town is ultimately going to be redistricting. So the congressional redistricting, this is kind of swept across the country. We've seen Texas, we saw Indiana reject a call to redistrict this week. We've seen Supreme Court, we've seen lower court fights go on this. California put it on a ballot, and they're in the process of redistricting in favor of the Democrats. So it's kind of been a push and pull. Florida is expected to jump into the fray, and in fact has put forth several committees that have been working on this. Although there isn't a map put forth, Ron DeSantis says that he is looking or wants these committees ultimately to put forward maps that will eliminate all of the Democratic districts for the congressional districts in the state of Florida. Currently, there are 28 congressional districts in the state of Florida, 8 of which are held by Democrats. 3 are in kind of your central Florida area, in your Tampa, Orlando area, and then the remaining 5 are in your Miami-Dade, Broward area on the east coast of Florida. So that being said, it's going to heat up a little bit. It's probably they're not going to be a special session because we simply don't have enough time. They start back in January, so there's really no reason to start a special session. But there's going to be some committee work and push towards these redistricting efforts. So I just wanted to see, Christy, what kind of thoughts are you looking at from the Republican camp, and what's going on with redistricting in Florida?
Well, I would dissent a little bit to how you characterized DeSantis is trying to eliminate all of the Democrat seats. I think DeSantis is, again, trying to do his job. He's expected to not only be the governor of Florida and represent the entire state, but he is also a Republican. He was elected as a Republican. A majority of Republicans want him to lead as a Republican. And that's why he's been there. And that's why he's been so wildly popular in the state. He has never said he wants to eliminate Democrat seats, but he is, the redistricting battle has always been a big issue. I guess like my one thought, for example, could be like, to me, again, I believe it's more representative of what the state wants, right? So the redistricting issue, the redistricting, I'm sorry guys, I'm like totally dying. The redistricting of certain areas to maintain a Democrat person in the seat, that should not be the goal. It shouldn't even be partisan. It should be just representative of the population and the area. So for example, it used to be District 25, now it's District 26, Mario Diaz-Balart. The fact that there's a small section of those East Coast areas that are very, very heavily Democrat, but it carves out certain Republican areas in that East Coast area. The way it was districted and has been districted to the point that it's been a Republican representative indicates that it's trying to be as fair to everybody. That's just my take. And I haven't seen any maps. And I know you've got your opinion, Cindy, for sure. And I'm sure it's probably very, I guess harsh. But with that said, like, we haven't seen any maps. We haven't seen any maps. We don't know what their intention is. So to jump the gun and claim that he's trying to eliminate Democrat seats is a complete misrepresentation of the facts so far.
I don't think so. I was trying to look at it, but I'm pretty sure that DeSantis did say that he could get it down to 0 districts. That wasn't something that I made up because in actuality, taking Florida congressional districts down to 0 Democratic seats is going to be a really difficult prospect if that is in fact what he wants to do. But that was what I had heard DeSantis had said. That wasn't trying to put words into his mouth. That was quite literally what he had said. And I'll find the quote to prove that to you later.
I'm just going to Google it right now. I
tried to Google it and it didn't come up, but but I know that this is something, this has been going on around the state. There is no real precedent for this kind of mid-term, mid-century, not mid-decade, that's what it is, century, decade, mid-decade redistricting. Now, I do know that the state of Florida is trying to make a legal case around the undercount, and that is seemingly supposedly going to be the cover or political cover for this. But I mean, let's call a spade a spade. This is what's happening around the country. This is what Donald Trump has asked. He asked Texas to pull up 5 seats, and we know that Ron DeSantis isn't going to do something or let Abbott do something without coming back with his own, because there's a bit of a push and pull between Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis of being, the best state, the best MAGA state, the best Republican state, whatever. So there has been maps that have been leaked. Now, nothing official out of the committees, and they are actually looking exactly like I had anticipated, because what has happened around the state of Florida, and I will disagree that it's fair, because it's not for the most part. It is very clear that the state has been cracked and packed. The state has actually been a focus of several Supreme Court battles around districting because of the lack of fairness in the maps. And the Democratic seats right now are very highly concentrated. That is their packing, your classic packing of the crack and pack gerrymandering strategy, right? So you have like Debbie Wasserman Schultz's seat is like Democrat plus 27, right? Like it's redonkulous in terms of it will never, it's impossible for a Republican to win that seat, right? And I'm talking about like, this is Cook political, not the percentage differential, which some people get confused on. By comparison, Florida 19, the district that we both ran for it, and the year that we ran for it was a Republican plus 13 district, according to Cook political, okay? And with that differential at R plus 13, there was only a 1% chance of a Democrat winning, okay? So yes, you can imagine plus 20 or a Democrat plus 27 district is like, you know, impossible for a Republican to win. So what we've seen across the state now with actually the most recent maps that DeSantis had put forth, right? Because these were already the most Republican favorable maps. It eliminated Democratic districts in the northern part of Florida where there was legal battles around that as well. But that was already very favorable and had eliminated Democratic districts. The population of Florida, in terms of the voting population, is not 100% Republican, right? I mean, that's where I push back on, oh, this is what everybody wants. It's not. Most of these districts are uncompetitive because they are drawn to be uncompetitive. I actually would love to see more fair districts balanced so that both parties had a more equitable shot, because most of the counties, like us in Lee County, like in Collier County, it is, you know, there's a Republican advantage, but you still have almost in thirds. There's a little bit bigger on the Republican side, but Republicans, Democrats, and nonpartisan folks. So if we had districts that were more reflective of that, we would have more competitive races overall. But what we see is, like, in my opinion, gerrymandering going wild, and it's going to continue to go more wild. But I do think that one of the interesting things of the maps that did leak out, and who knows about what they if they're really under consideration, but in order to comply with the state constitution, they have to be clear, contiguous districts and natural communities. So they have to find lines that are reasonable to people. So in Florida, it's illegal, according to the Florida State Constitution, to have districts that are those weird snake and starfish ones that you might see in other states that are gerrymandered, like Illinois, or I think Texas has got a couple like that snaking around some of the cities. But we can't do that here in Florida. So in order to break up the blue majority districts on the east coast of Florida, you have no choice but to cut it straight across. Okay, so that means they're going to be putting those Democratic voters into the Republican strongholds over here in Southwest Florida. So that's what some of the maps, the potential maps that I saw we're looking at, and it basically takes this district roughly from a Republican plus 13, according to Cook Political, to about a Republican plus 6. So halves essentially the lead of the Republicans. So I thought that was very interesting, and that's what I kind of thought was going to happen, because of this is like a number and geographic puzzle ultimately if you're going to be playing this game. So
looking at just a website that's like one of the potential maps, but again, so here's my response. We don't know what's getting put forth right now. So we're really jumping the gun and saying they're going to have they're going to have a Democrat leadership in the state. We don't know what is going to happen at all. So this is jumping the gun. I can't find anything where DeSantis says that he was trying to eliminate all the Democrat congressional districts anywhere. So if you do happen to find that, please do send that to me, because I will eat crow if that's the case. But I really don't think he would ever say that. With that said, though, I agree. This state is historically very purple, right? It has always been very mixed. With that said, though, especially after COVID, we became a highly Republican state. And though we are probably still flippable, that is a new factor, it can be changed later. I understand the point of saying, oh, we should redistrict to make it more fair for both parties. However, to give, so for example, let's say we redistricted 19 to be a little bit more fair for Democrats. is that really representative of the people in 19? Not really. 19 is highly Republican and has been historically Republican. And the people in the Southwest Florida area are very generally pretty Republican. And I've lived here my entire life, born and raised. I've known this area my entire life. It is pretty conservative. And so to redistrict to give the Democrats a little bit more of a fair advantage is exactly that, giving it an advantage that I don't think is quite deserved. These districts, the redistricting from DeSantis's perspective is not to eliminate Democrat control, but it is to make it. So we look at the East Coast, contrastingly, and the East Coast has a very strong, and Southeast, I should say, in the Miami area, has a very strong hold with the Democrat Party. Let's look at Tampa, for example. Tampa is also very, very strongly held by Democrats. Is it Kathy Castor? That's the congresswoman? Yeah. Okay. So the issue is not what the redistricting is showing, and that's what you had mentioned before. No one's telling anybody to move to these Republican districts. In fact, if they did, then what would happen in those districts when it comes to voting would be an area flips. However, Democrats tend to gravitate towards those areas, and Republicans tend to gravitate towards theirs. And that's what we're seeing, and that's what I believe the redistricting is trying to represent here. And that's why we don't know, we can't possibly know until we see some maps that come in front of us that are actually put forth through the special session that DeSantis wants. But we can't really even know, and we definitely can't claim that DeSantis is trying to eliminate all the Democrat districts when I can't see any evidence of that whatsoever.
Oh Lord, I think it's funny that you're trying to carry water for DeSantis on this, because this is very clearly a political issue. There's no reason to do this mid-decade redistricting. What's the rationale for it?
I'm carrying water because you just misrepresented something factually. And so I'm
going to find that. I'm going to find that article. But this is actually,
I will possibly e-crow, but I was even on CNN just now, which I think is very left wing. Can't find it anywhere.
CNN. It might have been Florida politics, but I'll find it because it might be that it might have been an interpretation, but it was definitely something that I had heard through the grapevine.
Interpretation, yes. So we can't claim that something is factual when it's not factual.
All right. So clearly the redistricting you just want to punt on because it's not happening yet. And it'll be interesting to see what they do come up with, because we're getting down to the wire, frankly, in terms of the ability.
I could tell you my perspective why the redistricting should be happening in that way. It is still trying to represent the population in Florida, which is Republican red right now. When we see changes, maybe the redistricting will reflect that. But until then, the districting.
Why do it now, though? Why do it now? What's the point of doing it now? We just did it 2 years ago.
Because this is DeSantis's last year in office. He has made promises to represent this state the way he was voted in by certain people with certain values, and he's keeping that promise.
All right. So that is a to be continued discussion as that unfurls in the Florida legislature.
Give me a second.
You okay? Grab a drink of water.
I started laughing, just giggling with you, and then I choked on my.
Yeah. So there is.
I don't like bickering, but like this is our thing. And so I started giggling.
We're doing fine. This is what I mean. It's, and listen, that's like there is nothing there. You're right. Like all we're doing is looking in the future. We don't know until we know. So we'll find out. And if I find that article, then I'm going to make you do some Hail Marys. So. Anyway, sorry. My husband and I were having.
Then I will eat crow, and I will publicly do so.
we're talking about Catholic Church and religion stuff, like all the season and whatever stuff, and we were talking about having to go to confession and stuff like that, and like what your punishment is. And he was like, "Oh, when I went, like it wasn't a big deal. I had to say Our Fathers and a couple Hail Marys or something." And it's like he's like, "But I hadn't been to church in a really long time, so I felt like it should have been more."
Most of the time, the prayers are just for you to reflect. So if you got a really good priest that here's your confession and here's your penance, what they tell you is just like, look, you're gonna say these things, you're gonna repeat the prayers, but it's all in an effort to be like, are you sorry? Do you need to do better? Good, move on. You know, it doesn't matter if you go to church a lot. It's more just like what's in your soul.
There you go. Okay, so we back to the legislative session. Have you seen any bills that are, or any issues that are coming up this legislative session? Maybe something that's already been out of committee that's interesting to you?
Well, there were a couple things that I actually wrote down that I did want to bring up. First of all, we have not addressed the 2 shootings that happened in the last 2 days. So I feel like, and again, it's so tacky to say thoughts and prayers, and I understand that, but given that we are not we're political commentators at this time, but we're not actively in the leadership role that we can do something. So first, I just want to acknowledge the tragedies that happened at Brown University and in Australia, particularly, as you pointed out, Happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah season has started, and what's happened recently. And I wrote down the Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk, and Candace Owens drama, something to discuss.
The battle.
Well,
all right.
I have been silent on that matter. So as much as I want to talk about something legislative, and I had a couple notes, but because I've been also sick, and I just wanted to like reconnect since it's been several weeks, I wasn't sure. Those are just things that I have written down.
Do it.
It's up to you.
No, because actually one of the things that is up in the legislature is the rollback of the age to purchase long guns, which was part of the post-Parkland shooting legislation, where that raised the age to 21. And that was part and parcel of the idea that the young man, the man who was involved in the Parkland shooting was 21 or was 19. And there's brain science that says, you know, you're more impulsive. And if you have access to weapons and you're impulsive, you're more likely to act on it, et cetera, and so forth. So that was a pretty bipartisan effort. There were Republicans that had supported that legislation. NRA, I know, came down on them a ton, giving like lower grades to even Republicans that had been long time, whatever, and gun advocates, NRA advocates. I got a special commendation that year from the NRA. I got an F- because I was a Moms Demand Action candidate. And as I continue to be a Moms Demand supporter, we advocate for common sense gun legislation. These are the things that are widely popular. 60% or more of Americans agree with things like universal background checks, and ensuring, things like gun licensures, insurance, proper gun storage and safety, and red flag laws. So I do feel terrible that we have had this scourge of gun violence here in the United States, and that our kids are continuously have to deal with it, and it frightens them in their schools. And we even saw a Parkland survivor was in the Brown shooting as well. So this is something that I have been a long time vocal supporter for more common sense gun legislation. And I'll leave it at that. Go ahead, Christy, take it from your perspective.
So you and I have talked about this before, especially back in 2020 when we were both running for 19. The thing is, the Constitution. Okay, so let me backtrack. As somebody that is such a supporter of the Constitution, I truly, truly believe that every single even comma needs to be analyzed. So the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, to me is unequivocal. However, I acknowledge that the well-regulated militia section is what people argue for common sense gun violence laws. With that said, though, the common sense issue is where I even have additional questions. So again, constitutionally, based on my analysis and my interpretation, the Constitution is very clear. So whether we think it's something that needs to be backtracked or reformed or amended needs to be through the proper amendment steps. It's a constitutional right, shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed so long as you pass a background check, so long as you are this age. It says shall not be infringed. And I also am aware that many, many amendments in the Constitution have a lot of little addendums attached, like even First Amendment, freedom of speech, time, place, and manner rule, things like that. I'm fully aware. With that said, though, the common sense issue. You said scientists say people are probably more impulsive before the age of 21, and therefore
25.
we should restrict. Before 25. So we should restrict up to a certain point. That was Dane Eagle's argument back in 2020, and I called him out several times on that when he said that he was pro Second Amendment, and I said, no, you're not. You actually voted in favor of raising the age to 21 in the state of Florida. So just be honest about what you stand for. And he justified it, and he said it was in response to Parkland. However, there are a variety of reasons why people can be more impulsive. There's a variety of reasons of why people can be more violent. There are a variety of ways that people can be violent, not just with guns. Who is always going to be the determining factor to decide who gets one and who doesn't? Even with common sense, that's where the danger lies, especially for someone like me, for somebody with a family from Cuba that escaped, and that country fell apart because they kept giving power to a government that ended up being in control of so many things. And all those additional factors, if you have control by one sect, and then it trickles down to the people, and the people lose more and more personal liberties because the power was transferred to one type of party or one type of value system. That's where the danger always lies. So common sense is a great concept. However, whose common sense is going to be the ruling factor? That changes all the time. So right now, you don't like President Trump. I know that for a fact. You don't like Republicans very much as leaders. Their common sense is a lot different than Democrats' common sense. Where does the common sense begin? So when we start allowing the federal government or state governments to infringe on personal liberties because they are determining what is or isn't common sense, then we have sections of power overcoming the powers of individuals. And this is where the Republican Party actually has so many flaws that really frustrate me. Republicans are putting a lot of value into virtues that the Republican Party currently has and states' rights, instead of remembering the very fundamental issue that the Republican Party should have always been about, which is individual rights, individual liberty. So even Republicans are like, we want to give so much power to the state to decide. Democrats want to give it to the federal government. And I'm like, no. The Constitution says shall not be infringed. And that's a personal liberty. And we need to bring it back to that. I digress.
Interesting. Now, I could find a lot of modern day parallels with your disdain for power consolidation, both in Florida and Washington, D.C. But the reason that we, in the parlance of the moms demand common sense, gun sense legislation, is that it's actually popular across the board. So when you poll people on whether or not they think that there should be background checks, pretty universally popular. It's like 67%, right? So it's not, it's a little bit more empirically based than just common sense. This is not just saying something like that, but these are things that
really quick though.
Yeah.
People like me are never polled. So it's easy to say that.
Either, so.
Well, I'm pointing out though, it's not as empirical as you think, because there's a lot of people that would agree with me. I know a lot of people that are not in politics and they agree with me, but we're never the ones that get polled and feel represented. So we hear about what the country believes or the state.
There's, and listen, and there's all sorts of shenanigans that people can put in polls. So, but these issues are the ones that are, the reason we call them common sense is because there is a popularity behind implementing that. Now, and you can always say, look, when you get into the nitty gritty, people agree or disagree, and then you throw in political stuff into it, people agree or disagree more or less too. So, but these, I think a lot of people do feel like that if there was larger responsibility in the same way, like with, good parallel is with automobile licensure, right? For a long time, automobiles were the number one killer of children. So that's why, states decided, okay, you have to have a license. Okay, you have to pass a road test, right? Oh, hey, you have to have insurance as well. I think that it's very fair to say that we could do those things for guns and not infringe upon somebody's right.
Yes. Okay. So I get where you're coming from, and I will always digress. Like, I see your point, but again, it brings me back to, like you just pointed out, you're alleging that this common sense concept is more accepted through a larger number of people. I really dissent to that. I really don't see that. I feel like, and that's why so many people consider us like a silent, that's why the Republican Party refers to itself as a silent majority, because they've been silent.
Empirical evidence to back up.
And there's not empirical.
I'm messing with you. Okay.
I know, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but I don't believe that. So you're saying this is empirical evidence because we polled 1,000 people, and it's kind of like, you polled 1,000 people and you left out so many other people. And these polls, like you said, they have so many shenanigans. And this whole thing is common sense comes from polling. And
listen, I will 100% agree with you that was political language that I used.
Yeah, I know.
Like that, because that's part of where it comes from, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so the other component of this, aside from what's going on in the state of Florida and all that other kind of stuff, the nuances with the Bondi Beach attack, okay, because that seemed to be a targeted attack against a group of folks celebrating Hanukkah. And it happened in Australia, which is a place that has very, very strict gun laws in response to a 1995 mass shooting. In fact, this is the first mass shooting that they've had since 1995. So what is your thoughts looking at with what had happened in Bondi Beach?
So as you just pointed out, they have stricter laws. So if we're going to talk about gun laws and gun rights and things like that, this just showed like stricter gun laws is not necessarily going to stop this kind of violence. I
don't know. It stopped it for 30 years. I was waiting for you to say that. I was waiting. It worked for 30 years. We have more mass shootings. We've had more mass shootings than days this year.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't say, like, if you put the empirical effectiveness of the gun laws of Australia versus the gun laws of the United States, Australia wins hands down.
Australia has plenty of violence on its own. Australia is not as populated as the United States, not nearly as populated as the United States. So to compare apples to oranges and how many people we have conducting crimes versus Australia, it's smaller population.
Per capita still wins.
Lack of population and stronger gun rules still does not stop the violence. So you can talk about per capita all you want to. However, and you know what, let me just always go ahead, and this is what I rely on. As a teacher, I would feel a lot safer caring because I've been through red alerts. We've had red alerts where there's a potential shooting or a bombing at a school not too far from us. There was one, it was a threat and never actually happened, but we were under red alert. And I remember our kids were packing into the pods, we're turning off the lights, we're hiding them in a classroom, and I wish I was packing ready to defend my kids because I'm looking around looking for fire hydrants and anything I could do to defend my kids, my students. So I'm just throwing that
was a bit traumatic for everybody, considering there was no no shooter.
It's traumatic enough to have to do the drills. It's traumatic enough to have to do fire drills. It's traumatic enough to have to do tornado drills. It's traumatic. I remember my first year teaching in 4th grade, we had 3 back-to-back tornado warnings each day, and they were sobbing in the classroom pods for like an hour while we had to hide out. And I remember playing Descendants music. Do you remember the musical Descendants from Disney Channel? I remember playing that. So yes, I understand that it's traumatic and we shouldn't have to fear gun violence. I agree, but we've got a bigger issue of violence in general as a problem than the gun restrictions. So with that said, especially during the holiday season, especially being the first day of Hanukkah, especially being like a time of reflection where this should be, you know, where the globe comes together in thanksgiving and love and kindness and merriness, we have disdain for the Jewish population. And I'm not just talking about Democrat Party. I'm not pointing blame. I look at people with the Republican Party. I'm looking at, as I pointed out, the Candace Owen followers that, you know, like somebody will post a comment saying that what Candace Owen is doing is not right and she's not behaving well. And somebody says, it sounds like you're being paid by Israel. And it's like, what on earth is happening right now? So we've got a bigger issue of the trigger of violence versus the gun issue, in my opinion. So I want to know what your thought of that is with how people are behaving. And I understand we've talked a little bit about it. We really haven't gotten into the whole Gaza-Israel thing just yet, and it's probably a little too late to start on that in this podcast. But
we can pop in on it.
We've touched on it a little bit, but to me right now, I'm more concerned of how people are behaving in general. Like I have seen, since it's the holiday season, I have seen more vitriol, more unkindness, more hatred and bullying than ever. We had a period where we called it like the snowflake era, where things were going rogue and people were like treading lightly. But now the pendulum has swung in the exact opposite direction, and people are like 1,000 times worse and harsher. And it's also coming from the Democrat Party as well. I had a Democrat call me the R word online, and I was like, I thought you guys were the ones that were super against that. And that was not okay to say. You guys are the ones against bullying, and you're saying that to me. That's unacceptable behavior, just because I'm saying that, I digress. So it's just the behavior in general. And this particular shooting at Bonny Beach in Australia, to me, is a grand issue of the Israeli-Gaza conflict, but also just in general how people are behaving, because it happened in Australia. It targeted Jewish people, and it targeted a religious people on a religious holiday. And it's not as if it was like in the Middle East where the conflict is arising. It happened in Australia.
Yeah.
And that's what's so alarming, that the violence is just splattering across the globe and people are taking it personally. This is like tumbling into it has tumbled into a verbal World War III, and now it's starting to get more and more violent.
Yeah.
Physically.
So yes, let's say the whole, we can dive into Israel and Gaza and the political things that are going on that another time when we have more time on it. But just on that note, I do want to say I believe in people first, and that I am against political violence of all kinds, whether that is individually driven political violence, whether that is state-driven political violence. Those are things that I have fundamentally been against throughout my entire career, and actually have worked in my career to try to stop both of those things, right? Through poverty alleviation. And that was one of the reasons I started studying and getting into poverty alleviation and international development, was because I graduated right after September 11th. And I saw that as a way to stop extremism and terrorism around the world through another means, right? So if we help people to gain independence, economic independence, then they're less likely to be radicalized, okay? And I still fundamentally believe all of that. I also believe that that we cannot accept this kind of level of state violence. And I think that's one of the issues that we see coming up with Israel. Now, this is being piled on to already, like you said, very tenuous times where people are being ratcheted up. Okay, we're being ratcheted up politically, and we're being ratcheted up by our algorithms, right? This is making folks money on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. And it's not usually real people, guys. Okay, it is fake bots that want us to fight with each other, and it ratchets it up, these feelings, and it does have real world consequences. And I do think that that has probably been it could have been a factor in what happened in Australia, but it's definitely a factor in what happens in our communities. And I think that we are also learning a lot more, I guess, about, with the Epstein files and all this other kind of stuff, with the connections that powerful folks have had around the world. But I think fundamentally what we need to do is come back and remember that us as people in our communities, people in other countries, right? People not in our communities, but the actual people, not the powerful, not the corporate folks. We are people just trying to live our lives the best that we can. And I think in the reflection of the holiday times, we should reflect on being humble and giving grace to one another and helping one another. I don't have a good solution about how we can do that, because I do think it's so easy to get ratcheted up. But I think that once we start to understand that some of the systems that we're being manipulated, right, a lot of times to get these kind of angry feelings, and that I believe having access to weapons makes it easier to kill people in response to that. But honestly, so does having a social media environment where people are saying nasty things without consequences to each other, right? It reminds me, what is it, the Mike Tyson quote? Whereas, like, you know, you're not going to say that to me and I'll punch you in the face. I forget, I'm screwing it up right now. But basically, it's like, you wouldn't say that to my face. All right. Like, you wouldn't say that to somebody's face because you used to get punched for that kind of shit. Right? It's basically like, people will say stuff to each other online. Sometimes they're fake people, but sometimes they're real people, and they say things because there's no consequences. But you would never say that to somebody in their face because you're going to be publicly shamed or punched. So maybe we need to get back to that.
Actually, just a question though, like, so this is the question that I'm always juggling, because I believe in individual rights. So I'm not in favor of companies being restricted on their free speech and how they want to run their company. However, when companies get LLC protection, it's not like it's a sole proprietorship where an individual is going to suffer directly for their actions. The company has become its own entity, and we're protecting companies over the individual rights and safety of people. So if we want to restrict guns and take away the individual liberty in the Constitution of the person, that they have a right to bear arms and it shall not be infringed, why can't we? And so I juggle with it because I'm not saying I'm in favor, but this is the question I have. Why can't we have some sort of like stops or some sort of limitations or yielding on these companies and their algorithms and what they allow? We have in Florida right now, which still hasn't quite been resolved, restrictions on how companies can handle minors trying to sign up for their social media platforms. And I remember I've told my students that frequently because they'll make a joke of like, I saw this on TikTok. I'm like, you guys shouldn't be on TikTok. You guys know that, right? And then they're like, am I going to get arrested? I'm like, no, you're not going to have an issue. It's the company's duty to take care of reasonably how to prevent you from being online. But like, what else can we have for these companies? And this is something that got brought up in 2020 with the fact checking. And the fact checking wasn't always an issue of fact checking. It was providing context, even though the context was actually something not within the general quote. It was providing context to make a point. And it's kind of like, why don't you let people decide for themselves? Let them hear the quote and find the context on their own. Why do you have to mess with that? Why are the companies allowed this much freedom, but individuals are always being infringed? So I don't know the situation. I'm not sure if I'm in favor of, any kind of limitations, but I'm just throwing it out there as something because, like you just pointed out, people are going hog wild on social media, but they're also being incited by bots. They're not even real people. And the algorithm, the companies itself are the ones that are pushing it.
Yeah.
Because it's
content. And by the way, like, this has been a disrupting strategy by foreign governments and has been for a long time. China and Russia in particular have been engaging in this. And there's plenty of CIA and FBI files that have looked into this. But the idea is to get us to back away from our own constitution, our own rights, and democracy. Democracy, they've actually been successful at getting Americans to back away from democracy. So you gotta say it's a republic. I know it's like dying to come out of your mouth right now. But the point... I'm like... But the point is, but listen, but the point is that it's the idea, because Russia wants to make us weaker, and this has been the strategy. China wants to make us weaker. That's their strategy, and they've been very effective at doing it online. And unfortunately, we've kind of let the social media world kind of be open. Now, I'm about to read a book called Inshitification that is all about this. And so once I'm done with that, I'll give you a report back on it. But that's kind of like this is an activist who's been in this digital space warning about like how all of this stuff is getting out of control. But I do see that as part of it in terms of how we've ratcheted up the rhetoric, and grown distant from each other. So always go back to this dialogue, community, right? It's one of the reasons why we started doing this show and have been doing this show for several years, is because there's a value in having a conversation, even if we don't agree, right? There's a value in getting to know your neighbors. There's a value in going to your church or your community or your center or your synagogue, to going to the Christmas party, to doing things together and getting to know folks, because that is how we start to look at one another as human beings who are worthy of dignity and grace. And we get away from the manipulations of the politicians and the algorithm. So that's my final word for today. How about you?
I was just going to add to that. So it's so easy for people to, because we disagree, you must have bad intentions, Cindy. And you must see me as having bad intentions because we're not seeing eye to eye. And you have good intentions in your heart and I have good intentions in my heart. But since we disagree, we both, like, the other person must have bad intentions. And that's clearly not true. And this is where it all started. When you created this podcast and when I came on, it's that the fact that you and I have been able to have a dialogue, even when we were running against each other, you and I would be texting under the desk, being like, good job, like things like that, because we had enough respect and grace towards one another to say, like, I know you mean well, and I know you care about the people. So that's why you do what you do, and that's why I do what I do. And so it's exactly that issue. And so that's why I brought up the Candace Owen and Erica Kirk thing, because I've never met Erica Kirk in my life, but I have met Candace Owen, and I did kind of know Charlie as acquaintances. We weren't friends. We weren't very close at all, but I knew him. He knew, we knew each other. And we would see each other frequently for a period of time. And so I've on purpose been pretty silent on the whole discourse, because I'm not about to step my foot into something about conspiracy theories or anything that's happened. And especially when there's a lot of people grieving and hurting. But what I did experience is in the comment section, people were saying really nasty things about Erica, who I've never met. So I can't speak to her at all. I can't say anything about her other than they said she'll forgive the shooter, but she won't forgive Candace for trying to expose the truth. And I said, she's not saying that she's not going to forgive Candace. She's just asking Candace to stop, because Candace is actively saying a bunch of stuff about Erica and throwing out conspiracy theories. And people, especially in the Democrat side, have disliked Candace for many years because she speaks without the proof sometimes. She speaks without the evidence. And she's done that several times. So I'm just saying, like, hey, maybe since she doesn't have the proof and doesn't have the evidence, maybe she should stop, because there's a lot of people hurting over this. And this is not the time or place, and how she's handling it is not okay. And I put that in the comment section. And then a Democrat, and like it literally said, I'm a Democrat, proud. Oh no, it said proud liberal. That's so it didn't say Democrat, but it said proud liberal. And it had like the rainbow flag and a bunch of like stars surrounding and stuff like that. And they called me the R word for not believing Candace. And I almost clapped back and I said, like, you wouldn't have believed Candace has had anything to do with anything else. You would have hated Candace. So going back to that general issue of how you wanted to end it, it's like, have grace for each other. Remember, we're human beings. These are people. And we're speaking to each other and trying to be as reasonable as we can. And we don't have to be the enemy. So let's all reflect on what our values are at the end of the day. And we don't need to be the name calling. We don't need to devolve ourselves into what we're seeing on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, right.
If we're being quite frank.
And I'm just going to say this flatly right now. Democrats need to be very wary of Candace Owens, okay? Because I've seen a lot of my friends, they glommed onto her, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Like, I don't know. I think there's people are, they, you know, I'll say this generally, and not just to bash Candace Owens, but if somebody's making a lot of money saying things, you should be super careful of those people, right? Because they are making money for some reason, right? Like they have a vested interest in what they're doing, you know, like, so you got to be very careful about what they're saying. Like you can't just say, oh yeah, they're just a great person trying to tell me the truth. No. They're working an angle to make money. So just be very careful of that. But to real people in your life, be very kind, and do your best, and have some joy over this holiday season. I know it's been a tough time for a lot of folks. Find joy where you can, and help each other. So that's my Christmas message.
So same here to people that you know and you love. Be kind to them, love them, enjoy them, be happy, find the joy in life. And for people you don't know, even online, be kind to them too, and try to remember that. And this is our part. If you are not an elected official, because we talk about it all the time, we're not actual operatives. We're not elected people. The best we can do is spread an important message. And so you say your opinion, I say mine. And what we can say right now is, like, we can prove that people can work together and have a discussion without hating each other. And we can actually work together and have a good relationship for, you know what? Actually, we've known each other for more than 10 years. Did you know that? Yeah. So I just realized that this is my 10th anniversary of graduating college coming up.
Oh, wow.
So we're going on 11 years of knowing each other.
It's been a long time, but yeah,
it's totally possible to just be kind and respectful, because you never know, you might change your mind, or you might make a friend. So at least you have perspective, even if you don't agree.
True. All right. And because I was going to say, this is probably the last time that we'll be able to manage with Christmas and the holidays. So we'll probably see you back in January, unless for some reason Christy and I are just like itching to get back on. Then it will be a super special episode. But otherwise, do hope that everybody has a very happy holiday season, joyous Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Diwali. I don't know when Diwali is, but whatever holidays you celebrate, and then also have a happy new year. 2026 is an election year, so I'm sure it's going to be quite exciting. And let me get the banner up here. So thank you so much for joining us here at A Democrat and a Republican Walk Into a Bar online version. For now, I've been your Democratic host, Dr. Cindy Banier.
And I'm your Republican host, Christy.
And we would love to have your support. You can get a subscription. What a great holiday present for your favorite Politico. $49.99 a year and $4.99 a month. And that helps to pay the bills, because this is something that we do out of passion, and would love to have your support. You can get that on the plans and pricing page at bigmouthmediafl.com. We also send you directly to your inbox all of the videos and podcasts, as well as the articles we have on Big Mouth Media. You can follow us on social media as well. We would love to see you there. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Sorry, I'm so sick.